Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Khumo Pule, the current Adaptive Management Portfolio Lead. I'm having some internet issues, hence you can't see me. My screen is just black. I don't understand why. Maybe I'll have better luck next month when we're having our hybrid event on adaptive management. So the aim of today's webinar is not only to try and understand what adaptive management is, and it's not only to try to encourage people to use adaptive approaches, to integrate them into their workspaces, but it's also just to create a sense of learning around adaptive management. We're hoping that through the course of today, moving along onto the conference, that will eventually create a community of practice around adaptive management, because we live in a world that is constantly changing, often in unpredictable ways. So as SAMEA, we felt that adaptive management provides us with like a flexible approach that allows for continuous learning while we make adjustments to strategies, to programs, etc. Hence, we are all gathered here today, and we have the pleasure of being joined by Dena, who will be facilitating today's webinar. So without wasting much of your time, I would like to introduce you to Dena, and please feel free to use the chat to introduce yourselves. We'd like to know which organization you are affiliated with, where in this world are you joining us from? Name, surname, and email address, please. Thank you. Over to you, Dena.
Welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us. Please do introduce yourselves in the chat, put your name and your organization. Thank you so much for joining on this discussion with us. It is a journey towards the SAMEA Conference. So we are, gathering all the great minds together to talk about adaptive management. But before we do get into the content of it, we thought it would be a great idea if everyone could just get together in small groups and just start to discuss, what do you understand by adaptive management? Question, what do you understand by adaptive management? After that, we'll have some very limited feedback, just a little bit about what each group said. And then we will have an input by Sarah Chapman, Professor Sarah Chapman, who's going to talk about what is adaptive management and some key concepts. And then we'll go into more group discussions where we will discuss some questions that we're posing. And then we'll go have some feedback again. And then we'll, in between that, we'll have some time for questions and answer. Please do use the chat if you've got any questions. And feel free to raise your hand during discussions. Questions, of course, are good for everybody because we get to hear what people's thoughts are. You're also welcome to make contributions, statements. So please do participate via the chat or raise your hand if you want to make a verbal contribution. I see people are introducing themselves in the chat, which is great. Thank you so much. Keep that coming. We're going to break. We've got 30 participants. I think 6 of us are from SAMEA, from the working group. So Siva is going to kindly put us into some breakout groups so we can just discuss the question, what is adaptive management? How do you understand adaptive management? Just leave it open. If one person is able to take notes, it would be great, but it's not really necessary. And then just to give us some feedback in the when we come back together, and then we can just see how we're all understanding adaptive management. So let's do that. So Siva, if you wouldn't mind breaking us into groups.
Adapt and learn, being able to handle and adjust your approach to various challenges and circumstances, as well as the ability to change and learn based on those circumstances.
Okay, so keywords: change, learn, adapt, circumstances. Okay, great. Thanks so much. Ruth's group, room number 1. Is there someone from that group who's willing to give some feedback?
Okay, let me just, because we didn't agree, or okay, we didn't really select, let me just assist.
Thank
We
you.
saw it as an important element which assists management in decision-making processes.
Great. So key factor there is decision making for management.
Mhm.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Room 3, Jennifer, Sarah.
Yeah. All the things above, plus we talked about building resilience. And so adaptability and noting when the environment changes, and we spoke about the KwaZulu-Natal floods and yeah, and COVID, of course.
So your group introduced the idea of kind of big changes, big contextual changes.
In addition to the other things that have already been mentioned, yeah.
In addition to the other things, great. Okay, thanks so much. Room 4, we didn't really have a facilitator. Alan, Claire, Justice, Nontlebo, or Sinetlakla. Any of you willing to give us some feedback?
Sure, I'll go ahead. So it's more or
Thank
less
you.
what the colleagues have spoken about, but some of the key points that we raised was that adaptive management is basically a way of managing projects or programs by constantly learning and adjusting. So an example that I made was that, in the projects that we're running in Tshwane, you'd find out that some of the weeks there will be rain, and as an organization would then have to plan to see, okay, how do we get to reach our beneficiaries during those rainy days, because we can't just sit and not do anything. Yeah, so it's about having a plan that you put into action, you see what works and what doesn't, and then you make changes to improve it. Yeah.
Okay, great. So having a plan, but being flexible and open to change, be it because of some external weather conditions, or maybe something internal happens in your project that informs you that might not be the right direction you're taking.
Yes.
Great. Thanks so much for that feedback. And then the last group, Jen's group.
We also didn't pick anybody. I don't know if Maurice or Tim would be willing to give some comment. Otherwise, I can quickly run through. But it's very
Go ahead.
okay, so it is very similar to what has been mentioned. Just that these ideas of cyclical processes in which you're gathering information, data that's shared and used to assess implementation and then make adaptations to ensure that it's that the evaluation, or sorry, the intervention is really reaching the outcomes that is desired. So the learning, the reflection, having somebody really embedded in the process.
Great. Awesome. So all of the above. Thanks for that. And I can see we're definitely on track. And I'd like now to invite Professor Sarah Chapman from the School of Management at the University of Cape Town. She's going to introduce herself, and she's also going to give us some input on adaptive management from her perspective. So thank you and welcome, Sarah.
Thank you, Dena. Would you be able to share the slides?
Yeah, Sylvia, are you going to do that for us? Thank you.
We could start from slide 1. That'd be great. Oh, yeah. Okay. Hello, everyone. So as Dena said, my name is Sarah Chapman. I'm an associate professor at the School of Management Studies at UCT. I'm a program evaluator and have been for the last 15 years. And I convene UCT's Masters in Program Evaluation, and I also convene a short course with Ian Goldman on program management, a monitoring and evaluation approach. So thank you very, very much for this opportunity to speak today. I have 10 minutes to give you an overview into some insights into adaptive management. And I thought, it would be really, really useful to just actually give you a background to where the concept of adaptive management comes from. So actually, In my second life, 20 years ago, I actually trained as an environmental scientist, and actually adaptive management was coined. The phrase adaptive management and the book on adaptive management was first published in 1979 by environmental scientists. It is actually an environmental management process, and it's a process for adaptively managing complex and difficult ecosystem processes. So it took a little while for social scientists to realize that we could actually learn quite a lot from environmental scientists. Why is that? Because environmental scientists were actually the first people to actually productively use monitoring systems, indicators, and monitoring data in order to inform decision making. And they really wrote the book on using data to inform learning. And it was in 2012 that a quite well-known evaluator called Michael Quinn Patton started to make actually analogies between managing a complex program a social program is similar to understanding a natural ecosystem and managing a natural ecosystem. So just like adaptive environmental managers in the 1970s started to have this idea of adaptive management, Michael Quinn Patton started saying, wait a minute, we can actually learn something about this from environmental science. And we could make analogies between a mature forest, a stable ecosystem, to being analogous to a successful program. The formula is working, everything is working well, and the output and outcomes are consistent and sustainable in a kind of sustainable way. The next slide, please. And we actually have an adaptive management. This is Holling's 1979 adaptive management cycle. So they use this analogy of an adaptive management cycle. So just like a stable, mature forest or ecosystem, you have a period of growth where that forest is growing and you're managing that. And then you have a point where it's a mature, stable ecosystem. You have this stable forest and everything is focused on growth and efficiency. And, you know, in the kind of olden days, before the idea of adaptive management came in, environmental managers used to believe that it was their job as environmental managers to kind of maintain this equilibrium, this balance of nature, this state of growth and efficiency. And their job as an environmental manager was to make sure that the ecosystem stayed stable. And as program managers and evaluators, you might believe that that is also your job as well, to kind of get a program to the state of growth and efficiency and then keep them there and use data in order to ensure that you stay in that stable, productive state. And if that is how you see evidence-based management, then perhaps adaptive management is actually not for you, because adaptive management actually has a completely different way of seeing things. It has this idea of multiple states of equilibrium. And actually, it is not desirable necessarily to stay in a state of growth and efficiency and conservation. It is actually an adaptive manager should always be anticipating the unexpected. So next slide, please. So what we have in our ecosystem example is this idea that resilient systems are actually ones that are always changing and not being managed for optimal growth and efficiency necessarily. Next slide. So you have an analogy perhaps of a wildfire that goes through your natural, beautiful forest that you've been managing. And all of a sudden, you have a completely unexpected change where there's innovation now and an opportunity for regrowth. So next slide. And so this is what they call the release stage in the adaptive cycle, where there's an unexpected change, and now managers need to manage for regrowth and regeneration. Next slide. So then you have this phase of regrowth and regeneration, and then as we go on to our next slide, we actually start to close this adaptive cycle and go back into this reorganization phase. Next slide. And thus, this is the adaptive cycle. This idea that, yes, you can manage for growth and efficiency. And a lot of people in the feedback sessions and in our discussion sessions, they talked about, kind of outcomes-based management and just improving programs and keeping programs going great. That is a desirable state, and you can use monitoring data to have that state in adaptive management, but you also need to anticipate these inevitable cycles of release and reorganization. So actually, adaptive management is really only a suitable approach in systems of high complexity, high uncertainty, and where you can expect a capacity for growth and innovation. If you are managing a stable project that your sole objective is just to get the formula working and then maintain that state of conservation with some tweaks and that kind of thing, and you do not expect uncertainty, dynamism, and innovation to be characterizing your program, then perhaps a kind of a results-based management or outcomes-based management or evidence-based decision-making framework is more suitable for you. So adaptive management is actually only really suitable in these highly complex environments. Next slide. And so Michael Quinn-Patton was the first one, as I said, 12 years ago, to actually steal Holling's adaptive cycle for adaptive management and start to transport it into the context of highly, highly dynamic, innovation-driven social programs. And we started using this term in social programs, and it actually became part of the lingo of M&E and program management to the extent that we don't even know where it came from anymore. But this is where it comes from this adaptive cycle. Next slide. So the key thing to remember that adaptive management is a completely fundamental shift. And this is actually a quote from an article, more recent article by Holling and Sundstrom, where they reflected on their personal history of basically coining the phrase adaptive management and working on adaptive management. And I thought this quote was really, really summarized it. So resilience shifts attention from growth and efficiency to recovery and flexibility. Growth and efficiency alone can often lead to ecological systems, businesses, society, social programs to fragile rigidities, exposing them to completely unexpected, turbulent transformation. So there's this sense that you're in conservation mode. You have this stable ecosystem. You need to maintain it. You think that's your role as a manager, but actually it is a very fragile rigidity, and it's not a desirable state. Rather, you must focus on resilience to add learning, recovery, and flexibility as inherent properties of complex systems. It opens your eyes to novelty and new worlds of opportunity. So it really is a framework for systems where there's innovation. And you really, as I said, my experience of doing adaptive management in social programs is that it's not going to be a suitable approach for extremely rigid programs where there is no scope for flexibility and innovation. Right, next slide. So how do we actually do adaptive management if you feel that this is a suitable framework? So there's this concept of multiple stable states, right? There's the growth and stability state, the conservation state, which if you're in it, you should definitely focus on maintaining that state. And so for this, you need a constant flow of key information from your monitoring system to try and keep things in this equilibrium state. Also, there's an alternate state that you also need to be aware of, and that you need to realize that there is going to be a time for that crash, that change, and that reorganization, and that need for innovation that is going to come. And when that comes, we also need key data from key performance indicators to inform evidence-based decision-making. And this is where we come to our adaptive management cycle, which you might be familiar with. Next slide. So this is essentially the adaptive cycle. This cycle, as written, is from environmental management textbooks, right? This is exactly the same cycle that environmental managers will use for adaptive management, and it is being transported into the management of social programs. So it's this idea of having these periodic reviews of your overall monitoring program, planning, collecting data, evaluating, and then when that adaptive cycle splits and you move off from that growth and conservation stage to a stage of reorganization, it is necessary then to split. You'll see the green life cycle splits and then move into the adjustment stage. So you can see circled there is this key concept of identifying key performance indicators. And I think I would like to just end my 10 minutes with just some reflection on the importance of this idea of key performance indicators. Now, you might have familiarity with monitoring frameworks, indicators, you might have dashboards in your organizations, you might have been tasked to create dashboards, you might be familiar with monitoring data. That's fine, that's necessary, those can still be in place. But if you want to adaptively manage, experienced adaptive managers have spoken about a rule of hand. And that basically means no more than 5 indicators. 5 fingers, 5 indicators are what experience has shown are the maximum that a program manager can typically handle in terms of information streams if they want to maintain quality of the data and respond with innovation, regeneration, and adaptation. In other words, if you need to maintain your monitoring system for reporting, for compliance reasons, that's fine. But your adaptive management indicators should absolutely be whittled down to a few key indicators that you use frequently, adaptively, dynamically, and reliably to inform change. And I think one of the biggest battles, ironically, that I often have when I'm working with programs to help them implement an adaptive management system is to get them to let go of their indicators and actually whittle it down to a rule of hand, because it's always like, we need information, we need to know this, we need to know this. That is not appropriate in a complex, highly dynamic, innovative system where there's a need for learning and constant adaptation. So maybe just we can end by just reflecting a little bit on whether the organizations you work in or support are actually suitable for adaptive management. And if so, what would be your key indicators that you would hold in one hand that would allow you to implement an adaptive management system? That's it from me. Dena, I don't know how we're doing with time, and if we have any time for questions.
Great, yes, we do. We've got 5 minutes for questions, clarification or comments. Sarah, you've asked the question about, are your organizations suitable or ready for adaptive management? That is one of the questions which we will pose to the group discussions. So thanks for that, but absolutely. So yeah, anyone got comments or questions for Sarah? I'll kick off, Sarah. Yeah. So does it mean that you can't plan? If you are managing for high flexibility, does it mean we don't do any planning?
Sure, that's a good question. I mean, I think you absolutely need to plan, but you need to have a plan to maintain that state of growth and stability. So what an environmental manager would do, who's using an adaptive management system, is they would have, if they're in that stable state and they're managing for growth and efficiency, they would use their monitoring data to ensure that they're maintaining that state or getting to that state of kind of conservation or efficiency. So absolutely planning is necessary to maintain that state of stability, and then also to ensure that you are, if you're on an adaptive cycle where you're regenerating, that you have that that plan to get to that point. And then of course there has to be an adaptive plan, an innovative plan when there are those cycles of regeneration and restarting. So absolutely, planning is critical, but you need to embrace this idea of multiple states, and you have to have a plan for the growth stability state, and then also create a plan for those moments of reorganization.
Okay, super, thanks. We've got a question from Mike Mwale. Mike, please go ahead, take the mic.
Thank you very much. I just have a question with regards to the five, you said the 5 hands, is it 5 fingers?
Rule of hand, 5 fingers. Yeah.
Yes. So I come from the health sector, and we do have quite a number of indicators in our programmings. So I wanted to know how I can integrate the rule of that you just mentioned. How can I integrate management in the health sector as I do my monitoring and evaluation? Yeah.
Excellent question. I mean, my advice would be to say, what information can we get reliably, and can we act on quickly, you know? So in terms of the data, some of it will only be for reporting, for compliance purposes, or it just sits there and is not utilized. So the key thing is to think what kind of 5 key indicators are really, really giving me the key information I need around the growth, the stability or lack of stability of the particular program I'm working in. So I can't tell you what those 5 indicators would be, but you would need to work on what are those. And then as a manager, you would need to absolutely prioritize having timely and high quality data around that. And having management interventions where, you know, you meet as a team, you reflect as a team, you regularly check in on those data points and re-strategize and consider, okay, are we still in the growth and conservation phase, or are we at the point now where there is a need for innovation and reorganization?
Right. So what would tell you if there's a need for innovation? Would that be that there's some kind of crisis, something's going wrong, your key performance indicators are starting to show you that there's cracks in the system?
Yeah, so it could be a dramatic event like a fire or a flood, right? But it's not always, or it could be an analogous event such as COVID, or an absolute crisis in the program where there's a funding crisis or the program shuts down or something like that. So it could be something very obvious, but it could be a more subtle change that come in from your key performance indicators. So for example, if you're using again the analogy of a stable forest, then, you know, you might be checking the soil quality, checking the air quality, you know, there might be a few key indicators that saying that your ecosystem is actually stable, right? And then you might start to see, you know, the soil quality is declining, or the atmospheric pressure is changing, or whatever it might be. And that might give you an idea that you're no longer in necessarily that state of stability and conservation, and that you need to manage adaptively to maintain that.
So we just did an evaluation in the health sector in Africa, and one of the things that people are constantly complaining about is stockouts of it was in the HIV sector, of antiretrovirals, of prophylactic medicines. So that would be perhaps one key indicator, would be the supply of medicines to the facilities. And so if you see that that's breaking down, then that could be, for example, one of your key indicators. Is that something?
That would be a very good example of a key indicator. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Context.
Great.
Yeah.
Can I ask Siwe to raise it?
Yes. Who's that?
For such an insightful presentation. I like where you also brought. Are there drastic changes that make, well, like maybe the growth and like the program to just end?
Sarah, Sarah, sorry, you're breaking up. We can't hear you. Would you be able to put your question into the chat for us?
Okay, I'll do that.
And while you do that, we'll take a question from Jen.
Yeah, so then just still on this idea of the rule of hand indicators, would some of those indicators be maybe more contextual, like looking at kind of political like issues if you are working in a situation where you would need to look at maybe political stability or
Yeah,
so
I mean,
you
that,
gave some
that
examples
would
for
be-
like for forest health, but I was wondering if you have other examples in a more social development space, just to help us think about what would those bringing our set of indicators down to 5 is tricky.
Yeah, I mean, it could be something around the political pulse or the political environment that could be absolutely relevant. I mean, I can give you an example also from a program that used adaptive management with community health workers, and they were monitoring the community health, and the key thing was how many referrals they got back from the community, because people were, going out there door to door and telling, pregnant mothers to come in for antenatal checks, telling people to come to the clinic or referring them to the health facility. So a key indicator for adaptive management was the number of successful referrals. If they weren't actually bringing people back into the health facilities, if the community health workers were not doing that, then there was a problem with the program. So that would be an example of a key performance indicator.
Great. Okay, we've got Sarah's question coming through now. So it's, do we have circumstances where adapting and reorganizing does not work because the change is massive or complex?
Yeah, I think it's not always possible to reorganize and manage into growth and stability. It's not always possible. I mean, let's be honest, it requires very, very skilled management and resources. So absolutely, there are contexts where it's just not possible to regenerate and regrowth. And I mean, again, the analogy of the ecosystem, sometimes managed ecosystems have floods or fires or events that traumatize them, right? And no matter how talented the manager is, the context, the resources, and the environmental context make it impossible for them to actually manage the system back into regeneration, and it becomes a degraded ecosystem, and it stays that way. So absolutely, there are examples where it doesn't work.
Great. So nothing is a perfect solution. We always have to be watching out. We've got one more question from Ruth, and then we've got to go into our group so that we've got enough time for group discussion.
Yes, thank you so much. We are really learning. Thank you so much. These 5 key indicators, is it per intervention? Intervention, I mean, like, is it per program, per project, or per policy? Am I correct?
That's a very good question. I mean, I would say that whatever you're managing as a program manager is usually at the program level rather than a policy level or a project level. So a program manager will be looking at a theory of change or a particular social program that fits together and has a particular design to bring about intended outcomes. So it would usually be at what we would call the program level.
And we know from government that programs are sometimes not even well defined with the theory of change. Sometimes an implementation program is cutting across multiple programs or across departments. So it's kind of, I suppose, up to every unit to define. Probably isn't the right answer for that.
But I mean, I think setting the boundaries of the system is a key component of working with complex adaptive systems, right? And using this idea of adaptive management, which is particularly useful for complex systems where there's uncertainty, innovation, and change. And so, a key struggle with these complex systems is always defining the system from the beginning and putting the boundaries in place.
So that's the key, defining the system.
That's an excellent question and something you would need to grapple with as an adaptive manager completely.
Okay, we've got a question from Chamano in the chat, Sarah. I wonder if you can maybe respond to that in the chat, because we need to break it down into the groups. So Siva is going to put us into groups. If you could just share the slides, Siva, then we can just go people through what the questions are. So in your groups, we'd like you to respond to some key questions. And you don't have to respond to all of them. They're just triggers for discussion. So the questions are, why are you interested in adaptive management, or what does adaptive management mean to you? We've done that one. So more around, I think this is a really great one that's come up with, is adaptive management relevant and important in your context? So given what you've heard from Sarah, given what you understand by adaptive management, is it relevant and important in your context? What does it require you to do differently in M&E and management? That for me is like the critical question. But if you want to speak to others, that's also fine. And the last one is, where are the areas where monitoring and evaluation, as it is currently done, does not adequately support adaptive management? What are the priorities for change? So as Sarah's saying, sometimes, you might be doing management for project management reasons. You want to know how many liters of water you've supplied to a village and how many pipes you have to run for that. And that's a project management function, and you need those kind of indicators for project management, for budgets and so on. But for adaptive management, you need to identify a different set of indicators. And the question is, do you have what it takes in your organizations to do that? And also, is it relevant? Can you see how you could apply it? So we put a link in the chat. If you could click on that link, it will open up a slideshow. And if you go to slide number, after Sarah's presentation, you'll see there's from slide 19, there's space for different groups to take notes. So if you could just go to the slide with your group number, your room number, and ask one person in the group to please take notes. It would be great, because we want to use this information to feed into the strand that we're designing for the SAMEA conference. So the kind of notes that you take now will help us to choose abstracts that are being submitted and to curate the strand at the SAMEA conference to see what kind of conversations people are looking forward to. So if you go into your groups, you'll go to the slide for your group number. And if one person is willing to, most of the groups will have a facilitator. They could share the screen and one of you could take notes. And please also appoint a person to feedback again. If you don't, then the facilitator will feedback. Welcome back, everyone. I think all the groups are back now.
Yes, everybody should be back.
Okay, great. So if we could, again, have a quick run through the groups. So I don't think group one didn't take any notes, but if we could maybe just hear from group one, which questions did you focus on and what were your key takeouts from the conversation? Ellen, Kerry, Ruth, Samuel, or Chamano? Are you ready to give us some feedback? Ruth, are you still with us?
Yes, I think we're in group one. I just want to check if I can access the notes.
Yes. Oh, sorry, I was talking muted.
Sorry, Ruth. I don't see any notes of group one. Maybe you have notes somewhere else.
That's why I'm saying I'm surprised, because according to me, Samuel was taking the notes and then he's going to give us the feedback. But
okay.
He was taking the notes, yes. But now when you say you don't see the notes, I'm so surprised and disappointed.
Samuel? Maybe Samuel took notes somewhere else.
All right. I thought they would be saved automatically, but I did take a picture though.
Oh, great. Okay, I'll type as you speak
from the picture. I shall send the picture via Bluetooth and have it available on the chat area.
Okay. Well, if you give feedback,
just
I
to
can type while you talk. Yeah.
I beg yours.
You can talk and I will type the notes for you.
All right. Thanks. All right. The first one is about. We had the question where we were looking at why are we interested in adaptive management? And we said adaptive management helps to focus and achieve the result with ease. So it helps us to focus, achieve results with ease. And then the second one, answering on the same question, is we live in a changing environment, which is also complex. Thus, we need adaptive management. So in terms of adaptive management being relevant and important in our context, we said because we live in a complex and changing environment, as the environment changes, we need to adapt. So it is relevant. In terms of the requirements, what does it require to do differently in M&E and management? The team suggested that it would be better if everyone who's involved in programs need to be trained in M&E so that they can understand M&E. That would make it easy for the indicators which are selected for that specific program to be able to address as well the adaptive nature of the environment in terms of management. So people being trained in M&E so that indicators that are chosen are relevant and they also support adaptive management.
Great. All right.
Then
good.
there's a question.
Yeah.
There's a question which looked at what are the areas where M&E is currently done or where it does not support adaptive management. Then we said if M&E does not focus on application of the theory of change, then it does not support adaptive management. The last bit, what are the priorities for change? We identified a few. One of the priorities is that we need to assess how complex and dynamic the environment is. Based on that, we need to identify key indicators for adaptive management. We have learned that they shouldn't be more than 5 per program. And then we need to monitor the implementation of these key indicators. And lastly, we need to evaluate the outcome of the key program interventions for the results to inform future planning.
Wow. Okay, that's certainly comprehensive and very thorough. I see you went through every question and you got a response. That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Well done.
Thank you much.
Okay, so I'm going to ask other groups just to add information that hasn't already been repeated. If there's something that's already been said, please go ahead and please go ahead and add new information. So Shuat from group 2, anything you got to add?
Not necessarily to add.
Well, I think we focused on challenges, I think, eh?
Yes, our group focused more on the challenges of implementing adaptive management and kind of doing the transition from the usual management we do to adaptive management. And I think the key issues or challenges that we foresaw specifically Mildred, it's at NGOs was donor funded, that are donor funded and rely on the ability of donations, being able to implement adaptive management could be a challenge, specifically with in the transition. And the question was, is it feasible and applicable in NGOs? Mildred was saying that she doesn't think so due to human resource skills challenges and things like that. So just a lack of resources to be able to implement adaptive management. We also spoke about the difficulty with the 5-hand rule, of like being able to whittle it down to those key 5 indicators that are vital to the monitoring and evaluation aspect. because often the indicators are standardized, especially when you are reporting to donors or funders. They often require certain report formats that require certain indicators, and that could be difficult. And then we also questioned what multiple states of equilibrium could look like in smaller organizations. So I think we were very much focused on the challenges of implementing this.
Great, thank you.
Management.
Thanks so much. Excellent feedback. Thank you so much. So a lot of challenges that people foresee. Right, let's look at group 3. Thank you.
So group 3, yeah, many of the same points, but I think we also spoke about some of the challenges, and that often with government programs in particular, adaptive management isn't likely, that there are too many constraints on the processes and procedures and things that can't change. Whereas social enterprises, I think you see a lot more ability. And I think the point that was made by the previous group about the 5 indicators being difficult doesn't mean that those are the only indicators, but those are the indicators that you're looking for the maximum kind of ability to get feedback on. And you can still collect other indicators for your reporting and for compliance and all those other things, but you have to have indicators that really can show you areas where your program can improve and change and be better. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks so much. Let's hear from group 4. Sine. Sine, what's that?
From group 4.
No
So
trouble.
I will
Okay,
also, thank you. I will try and summarize and be quick. So also us in group 4, we try to answer, is adaptive management seen as relevant and important in your context? So we agreed that yes, it is seen as an important factor in our context, and we came up with the good examples. I can safely say after attending this course, yeah, some government departments are indeed adaptive, actually. Especially when we looked at the examples that we're talking about in our group. We talked about the KZN floods, and I can safely say that I was heavily involved in the project because our department does offer financial assistance for businesses. However, when KZN floods happened, what we did then, we went further ahead and contacting these businesses to say, yes, we are assisting you financially, maybe, for example, to exports, but now you're affected by this. How can we assist? Then an incentive program was designed for such companies that were affected by the KZN floods. So in that manner, to answer this question, yes, we agree it is important, and that's exactly what we did in terms of being adaptive. So another example that was given by our group was when COVID happened. They did mention that it's forced a lot of organizations to do an adaptation in terms of data collection processes, because a lot of companies that time they were doing paperwork, but when COVID came, it enforced everyone to shy away from doing paperwork, but rather to come up and implement new ways of digitalizing, for example, MS forms if you were doing paperwork. So in that sense, again, organizations are adaptive. What was the other question? Where are the areas where monitoring and evaluation is currently done does not adequately support adaptive management? What are the priorities for change? So we discussed that with our group, the conflicts management, the conflicts between the rigidity of external directed projects. Sorry, let me just minimize this. I can't see properly here. And lived world requiring adaptation. And we use the example of log frame. A lot of people tend to shy away from using a log frame as a guideline, you know, for your program to be adaptive. And then also, I think the link and the difference between the adaptation. Oh, I think this was a question. One of our members wanted to ask this question. Yeah, the last two. Yeah, but the summary of what we discussed. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yes, so interesting reflections on real life practice there. Thank you very much for sharing that. I was just wondering myself, like, how does adaptive management fit in with results-based management? I mean, how can they be integrated? Because I see that they're different mindsets, as Sarah was saying, but must be a way to integrate. Okay, so thank you. Group 5. Was there group 5 or was that the last group?
That was the last group.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So those were the key takeouts from the group discussion that we've just shared. And yeah, I'm just wondering if there's anyone else who's got any comments. So Sarah, if you've got any reactions to the feedback.
Not particularly, just really, really useful to hear everyone's experiences and insights into how they might apply adaptive management in their own context. So nothing more to add based on what was said, but happy to take specific questions if there are anything.
There's a question from Jen, what is the link between or difference between adaptive management and responsive management?
Responsive.
Yeah, if that could be, that was somebody had, as Khumo had said, like that was a question that we were hoping maybe you could help to elaborate on.
Is responsive management an actual thing, like a management framework? Because I've never heard of that. Or is it just mean management that is responsive?
Maybe Claire or Sneh, who could explain.
Can I also come in if possible?
Yeah, sure.
Yes. The response management, I think it's just a terminology coming from DPME. In other words, after you've conducted evaluation study, you take the recommendations, all of them as they are, in a template that is called response management. So now you present it at the management. You agree with the management. These are the recommendations that we can carry on, take them and implement them. These ones we cannot, but there should be a reason for that. And then the agreed upon recommendations, you take them and then come up with the so-called improvement plan to implement them, because now you've agreed upon those recommendations. So it's called response management.
Yeah, no, I thank you for that, Ruth. Absolutely. I think that, I mean, obviously there are similarities in the fact that you're using data for decision making, right? So you can't get away from that shares an overlap with adaptive management. But I would say that in and of itself, simply using data to inform decision making does not make it an adaptive management approach. So I would say that there's a broader philosophy that you need to understand and buy into as an adaptive manager. And just, also on another level, a little bit cheekily, the whole process of sort of meeting with management and agreeing on the plan, it doesn't really gel with the idea of high innovation, high flexibility, and high kind of on-the-spur decision-making that an adaptive manager would need to make. So it does feel like perhaps an appropriate system for government and a completely valid system and an effective system, but not in itself adaptive management, in my view.
Okay, great. So thank you very much. We've got 2 minutes to wrap it up. I'm going to hand back to Khumo. There are some questions in the chat around, are there any articles on how adaptive management is linked or not linked to results-based management? So maybe we will be sharing a resource list of, oh, Khumo, you got your camera to work. Fantastic. So we will have share some resources with you afterwards, and yeah, please feel free to share back resources with us. And I'm going to hand over to Khumo now. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sarah, so much. And thank you, SAMEA, for producing, and all the facilitators for doing your great work. Thank you.
And thank you to you, Dena, for doing such a fantastic job at facilitating this webinar. So mine is really just simple to talk to you about the next steps. So in next month, on the 11th of July in particular, we're going to be having a hybrid event in Cape Town and in Johannesburg. where we are going to further continue discussions around adaptive management. And these discussions are, of course, going to be leading us into the SAMEA conference for this year. So the details of the conference are in the next slide. And we'd like to encourage all of you to please just share any thoughts that you have about adaptive management. You know, if there was anything that was interesting or you resonated with during this session, write about it on your social media platforms, tag SAMEA, tag Southern Hemisphere. We have our Twitter handle there. And also we plan on creating an adaptive management listserv. So I'm not sure if everybody got the link to a survey, a very short survey. We're only asking 3 questions that Sive would have shared. We basically just want to find out if you have any interest in being part of sort of a learning community of practice on adaptive management. I don't know, Sive, if we can share the link to that very short survey in the chat. And Sive will just briefly tell us about this adaptive management listserv, because we can't get it up and running at the moment. Sive?
Thank you so much. Khumo, would you be able to share the link? I can't share the link and project at the same time. I'd have to stop sharing the screen. Yeah. So we are in the process of creating an adaptive management listserv, and this is a work in progress. But in the meantime, we will be sharing all adaptive management related information on our SAMEA Talk platform. So if you aren't a SAMEA registered user yet, please kindly do so. I'll also just put in the link here where you can sign up to become either a SAMEA member or a SAMEA user. But to be a SAMEA user, you don't necessarily have to pay to become a member, but you will still get all the communication. And then as soon as the adaptive management listserv is up and running, we will communicate how to be part of that listserv. So yeah, that's all from me. Over back to you, Khumo.
Okay, thank you guys so much for joining our session. We hope that we can continue the discussion and not just limited to webinars. Luckily, the chair of SAMEA, Jane, is here. Jane, I don't know if there's any concluding remarks that you'd like to make on your end.
Thanks, Khumo. Thank you everyone for your attendance today and for your engagement. And just to say that we do hope that you continue this conversation amongst each other and with SAMEA, with Southern Hemisphere, and that you participate and join us in the conference. It's happening in October at Birchwood in Johannesburg, and there will be, one of the strands will be on M&E for adaptive management, along with other strands, including tech-enabled tomorrow, M&E for just transition, M&E for impact investing, evaluation formed by youth, competencies, and so on. So it should be quite an exciting conference, and we really do look forward to continuing these conversations throughout the next couple of months. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everybody. I hope you have a lovely evening. Adapt and thrive. Don't forget that.
Nice one.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.